Hello and welcome. That was our amazing Tammy Briggs. Yes, Tammy. Tammy is our in-house harpist, and so much more than that. Tammy, you mean everything to Pathways to Peace. Thank you so much for that beautiful music as we begin. We are so honored and delighted to be with you today, and welcome to those of you who have joined us. This is CSW 67, and our presentation tonight is Standing Up for Justice, Advocacy in the Age of Technology. And this was both organized and will be presented by Pathways to Peace representative to the UN and my beloved colleague, Katie Carr. Katie, thank you so much. I am Tezkiah Gabriel. I'm the executive director of Pathways to Peace. And in a little while, I'd like to say a little bit more about Pathways to Peace. But tonight, or today or this morning, dependent on where you're joining us from, I would like to begin by just really honoring Katie Carr, who is our presenter tonight. And in a moment, I'll turn the floor over to her after we talk a little about Pathways to Peace and pause for a moment of peace. And so Katie Carr graduated from Rutgers University with a BA in sociology and a minor in history. After graduation, Katie moved to London in 2010 to attend Webster University at Regent's College and obtained not one, but 2 master's degrees in international relations and non-governmental organizations. Her thesis, The Lost Children of Britain, was published in the Oxford Monitor on Forced Migration. Katie is truly a global citizen. After graduate school, she began to work in human services in New Jersey until 2016. She currently works at the Division of Property Management and Construction for the state of New Jersey as a lead analyst. Katie Carr has been a Pathways to Peace program media coordinator and UN rep since January of 2020. And let me just say that Katie is my right arm and my left arm in both hands. I could not do my work without Katie. She also currently heads the Pathways to Peace social media team. She's the co-chair of the Advocacy Committee for the State of New Jersey Arthritis Foundation, as well as a member of the social media team for Pathways to Peace. She was recently voted onto the local leadership board of the State of New Jersey Arthritis Foundation. So Katie is so well versed in the topic that she's going to be presenting tonight. Katie, we cannot thank you enough for being with Pathways to Peace, for working alongside us in all of the work that we do, and for your vast experience in both being an advocate and training advocates. So we're just so fortunate to have you. So let me say a few words about Pathways to Peace for those of you who don't know who we are. We are a UN designated peace messenger organization that holds consultative status with the UN Department of Global Communications, DGC, and the UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. For over 40 years, Pathways to Peace has been engaged in innovation, collaboration, and movement building. Our vision is for a world at peace, and our work is about building a culture of peace. Pathways to Peace provides education, consultation, and mentorship And working in partnership over the years, Pathways to Peace has inaugurated several UN recognized global peace initiatives, including the UN International Day of Peace, which our co-founder, Aiden Madison, who passed a year ago, provided leadership at the UN and beyond for the passage of the International Day of Peace, the UN Culture of Peace Resolution and Program of Action, and the Peace Wave. Pathways to Peace works in partnership with peace builders locally and globally, multi-generationally and cross-culturally on programs that build peace and eliminate barriers to peace, including nuclear disarmament, climate change, racial equity, and gender equality. We invite you to join us in our peace building efforts. Please feel free to put your email in the chat box, and we would love the opportunity to connect with you beyond our time together today. Since its inception, Pathways to Peace has always honored and supported women's leadership, and we have been always present and engaged in CSW. This year, and I see familiar names and faces, this year we had 5 events, and I know some of you have been at one or more of those in addition to tonight. I should add, because we're talking about women, that on March 8th, International Women's Day, we launched our 2nd annual Exceptional Women of Peace Awards. And so I will put our that information in the chat box. There's a simple nomination form. You can nominate yourself or another for that very distinguished award. And I hope that you do. And so before I turn the floor over to Katie, I'm going to do as we always do, invite you to, with us, take a pause for peace. Earlier, I talked about the Peace Wave. The Peace Wave was established by our beloved Aiden Madison in 1983 as a way to make Peace Day every day. And it's celebrated and honored around our world at 12 noon in every time zone. So before we begin our time together, we're just going to take that minute of silence, that moment of peace, that we ask you to just settle in and relax into your chair and bring yourself into your heart. Breathe a little more deeply, a little more slowly. And bring yourself into your heart and draw your attention to that center of the chest, the seat of the heart. And imagine your breath flowing in and out through that beautiful sacred space. And as we breathe in and out, it helps to count 5 counts on the intake, 5 counts on the exhale. Focusing on that heart, we know and we can feel peace. So let's just for a moment breathe that one breath and focus on that one heartbeat that beats for peace. Thank you. Thank you so much. We invite you to join us and others around the world every day for a minute of silence, a moment of peace at 12 noon in every time zone. Thank you, thank you. And now, without any further ado, it's my absolute honor and pleasure to turn the floor over to my beloved colleague, Katie Carr. Katie.
1 second, let me just get sorry about that. You don't need to see pictures of my puppy.
But we love it.
On that note, let's just start off with the way I start off every presentation, which is a apology straight out for any chewing or whining you hear in the background. My dog is severely neglected, or at least he feels he is. So as Hezekiah said, my name is Katie Carr. I've been working with Pathways to Peace since 2020 at this point, which seems like it's been a lot longer than that. I'm a
because it's so much fun, right, Katie?
100%. Prior to Pathways, I worked as a youth UN rep for a small organization called Operation Peace Through Unity, and got involved with Pathways while planning a youth side event to the high-level forum on the culture of peace. So as Tez said, my work with Pathways has been as a United Nations rep, program media coordinator, as well as heading up the social media team. I also am currently the co-chair of the Advocacy Committee for the Arthritis Foundation State of New Jersey, a member of their social media team, as well as the head of the Walk to Cure Arthritis social media team, and was, as of last week, elected to the local leadership board for the state of New Jersey. So, you know, but my interest in advocacy started now about almost over a decade ago, when my, at the time, 11-month-old cousin was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And that led me to getting involved with the Arthritis Foundation as an intern, and, you know, rejoining them later after college, when I myself was diagnosed with multiple rheumatic diseases. And then on the international level, I became very interested in the in advocacy work through my graduate career. As Hezekiah said, you know, I had my initial thesis was on entitled "The Lost Children of Britain," which was about forcibly migrated children from Britain to colonial states of the British colonies. And then I also wrote a thesis on human rights and how social media affects people's views of them. So I've done quite a bit with that. But you know, the stories that I learned through my thesis work and throughout the course of my graduate studies really kind of always left me thinking of that Fred Rogers quote. When I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news. My mother would say, "Look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping." And I always just wanted that to be me. My area of interest has always been helping people, specifically children. So this has always been a passion for me. And once I got into this world, I got in very deep, and it just continually gets deeper, I'm finding. So I wanted to really use what I've learned the last couple of years, and you know, I'm learning new things every day. I mean, you'll see at some points in this presentation, I'm going to tell you about things I learned literally yesterday. So you're constantly learning new things. And I think this is a great opportunity to discuss how to become an advocate. And I'll speak of, you know, in the general broad sense, but also I always feel that it's very important to speak about self-advocacy as well. So I will talk about that a bit as well throughout my presentation. All right, what is advocacy? Advocacy seeks to ensure all people in society are able to have their voice heard on issues that are important to them, protect, promote their rights, and have their views and wishes generally considered when decisions are made and about their lives. And the first question we've got to ask ourselves when we're talking about advocacy is how to advocate, who to advocate for, what are the first steps to become an advocate. And throughout this presentation, I hope to answer some of these questions for you. So the first steps in order to become an advocate, if you're thinking about getting involved, whether it be, you know, within self-advocacy or even, you know, for a single or individual organization or at a larger level and helping promote legislation, is doing tons of research. You can scour the internet for the best organizations that will work on the information on how to move forward, whatever it is that you're looking to do. You can, you know, through that, reach out directly to organizations that you think you want to work with. And I promise you that any organization you reach out to is going to be over the moon to hear that you're even possibly interested. So the first thing about advocacy work I have to say right off the bat is do not be embarrassed, do not be shy. People who are interested in these topics are going to want to talk to you about it. I am sure that 90% of my friends and family are so sick and tired of hearing me discuss advocacy work that, you know, they probably just at this point tune me out. But the people who love it and are passionate about it are going to want to talk to you about it. They're going to want to bring you into their world. So the more people that come out and reach out to me and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, every time I'm so happy to talk about it. So never feel worried about reaching out to somebody, like cold calling them or cold messaging them and saying, I ran across your information and I would love to get involved. Those people are going to be so happy to have you in part of that. And a big tool to finding a good group to work with is going through social media. This day and age, you can find a social media page for just about anything and everything you could ever possibly imagine. I mean, whether it be Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Tumblr, I mean, you're always going to be able to find an organization that matches what you're looking for. And you may even find things that you didn't even know you were interested in by doing that, or organizations that are doing things that you never even thought about that just are something that seems like a great idea that you are, you know, you didn't know you had a passion for. And the other thing is you can always start your own organization if you don't find something that quite fits what you're looking for. And again, there's so many people out there that have their own organizations that would be more than happy to sit down with you and discuss how to get yourself off the ground. All right. You know, and then volunteering gives you that opportunity to kind of test the waters and see if maybe it's possible for you. Again, no one's going to be upset that you came and volunteered once and found that it wasn't for you. They're just going to be happy to know that they had somebody for that specific event come out and show up. So never be embarrassed to start and say, you know, I tried to this, but I didn't think it quite fit me. All right. So before we get into this, I know this is very cheesy, and if you're not familiar, this is actually one of the ways in which I learned. My graduate school classmates and I discussed United States law. This is something, if you're doing advocacy work on the legislative level, it's something that is just so important to know, and it can be quite confusing. So I think that it's a 3-minute video, but I think if you have not seen it, like I said, it's a little cheesy, but it's worth it just to learn how legislation does move through the United States government system. It's also, if you're not in the US, very similar in many different countries to how things work. And it's also very similar to how it works on the state level as well. So let me play this for you guys real quick.
Woo, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
So like I said, it's a little cheesy, but I feel like this is really the best way to teach how a bill becomes a law. And as you'll see here, there is a flow chart of how the process actually works. So recently I've been working on getting a piece of legislation passed in my home state of New Jersey. It is a bipartisan, non-financial piece of legislation designating May Arthritis Awareness Month in the state of New Jersey. And we've been working on this for about a year now. And in the state of New Jersey, we have an assembly and a Senate. In our Senate, it went through committee, passed right away. And it's so one of the things that we are currently working on is, it's been stuck on the assembly side, sitting in committee, and having to work within our districts and getting it moved out of assembly has been quite a process. So, again, this is just something that does come up, and I feel it's pretty important to kind of discuss and learn how you move through, because if you're looking to get laws enacted, it's so important to know how to move through this process. And so one of the things I want to talk about is how to schedule with an elected official. So first and foremost is to not let the process of scheduling with an elected official stress you out. If you're like me and struggle with anxiety, everything stresses you out. But, you know, there's a foolproof way to make sure that this is an easy, stress-free process for you. So there are a few ways you can go about this. If you have the ability, I like to call my elected officials directly. You'll most likely speak with their aide, but by calling directly, they have the organization, you know, it'll be fresh in their mind and they know to keep an eye out for your request. Most often they're just going to say, hey, send us an actual email. But at least that way you've made your voice known and they know to keep an eye out for you. When you call or email, here are just a few tips. Write out a script ahead of time for your for yourself or your fellow advocates to use. That normally makes it a little bit easier for yourself. And if you get flustered, it just makes it a million times easier to have something preset and ready to go so you can stick to what you've got. And I find at least having an idea of what I want to say in front of me just makes things a lot easier. The second thing is to make sure that you have your calendar when scheduling your meeting. And if you're going to be including other people in the meeting, make sure that you also have their calendars as well. And you're not always going to be able to find something that fits for everybody. So just know that going into it, that if you know your candidate only has, or your elected official only has one slot available, you may not all be able to get. Keep in mind your officials' calendars are going to book up fast. So you want to have a loose amount of time that you've got available, because so when you do make your schedules, you know, that make sure when you make the phone call, you relax, you breathe. And when you do get everything scheduled, make sure that you do confirm all the information, double, triple check it. You know, you want to make sure that you guys are on the same page, because you don't want your elected official to show up to a meeting that you have the time incorrect on. And it happens, your wires will get crossed and they may go, oh, sorry, I didn't realize that I had something else scheduled that day. And right now, because of COVID, it tends to be that they're still doing a lot of meetings virtually, which is, I think, personally better. You can take those meetings basically anytime, anywhere. You know, I do a lot of meetings in my car on my lunch break. I've been meeting with assembly members while they're walking between meetings on phone calls. So you get more chances and more opportunities to meet up with people if you're able to keep it flexible, rather than if you're tied down to an office place. So again, you know, some people are going to be disappointed that they don't get to meet in person. Honestly, you're better off just going with whatever makes it easier for them, because they're not going to be rushing to get you off the phone if they've got more time in between. So before you meet with your official, make sure you have a game plan ready and raring to go. If you have a large group, just know that not everyone is going to be able to speak for an extended amount of time. Some team members may only get to introduce themselves, and let each team member know what their role is going to be before you get into the meeting. Make sure that everyone understands the legislation and can answer questions on it. Be sure to be on time. Be a little bit early, even if it's a Zoom meeting, just in case. I mean, obviously things happen and your legislator may not even let you in until 5 meetings after the meeting start time, but at least you're available and you're ready. So if they want to meet a little bit earlier, they can. And always, as soon as the meeting starts, I always like to thank my official and come up with something specific that, you know, maybe I know about them, or a piece of legislation that I've seen that they've been working on, to kind of get on their good side and just kind of fluff them up. What person doesn't like to hear a little bit of a compliment when you walk into something? Specifically, I've met with my congressman, who was very well known during the January 6th riots. He was all over the TV as somebody who was cleaning up in the Capitol building after the fact. So the first thing I said when I met with his office was, thank you so much for making our district look so good. You know, people from all over the world, my friends everywhere have contacted me and said, what an amazing person you are and how great you've made us look. So, you know, and immediately they appreciated that. And they also knew that I was paying attention to what the congressman was doing. And so, and just as an FYI, a lot of times you may not actually meet with your official, you may meet with a staffer. So don't be disappointed if that happens. These staffers tend to be just as knowledgeable, if not more so knowledgeable sometimes on some of this legislation. So it's just as good of an opportunity, and they will get everything that you tell them, take notes, and get back to the legislator. A lot of times they'll actually make their own recommendations to them directly if they think it's a piece of legislation that they want to support. So it's not the end of the world if you meet with somebody other than the official themselves. And during the meeting, you may not be able to answer every question, and that's perfectly okay. You're not going to be able to answer everything. You may not know a tiny piece of the legislation or some random fact or figure, that statistic that, you know, supports what you're trying to say. So if you can't answer them, just tell them that you don't have the information on you at the time, and you'll find the answer and you're going to follow up with it. If you're advocating for something where one of the group has personal experience on the topic, like a patient on a certain type of medication, where when you're advocating for cheaper prescription prices, like something like insulin, or someone has suffered the effects of climate change, when you're advocating for more regulation, you have I would have them tell their story if they're comfortable. For our personal meetings, we always have a patient come in and talk about their struggles. If it's a piece of legislation where they're not being able to access a medication that's super important to their well-being, we have that person tell their story and tell them what happened as a result of them not being able to access that medication. And there's going to be a lot of people in your group who may have a story or strong feelings on something and want to share it, but sometimes it's really just best just to allow the one person to share in each meeting. If you're in a time crunch, you want to make sure you get a personal story and cover all your mission without running out of time. You know, your elected officials aren't going to have a lot of time, and when they allot those meetings, they're going to expect it to stay within a short frame of time. And letting everybody speak is going to deter from your moment where you get to do your ask. And make sure that you have any literature that breaks down the legislation or your group's mission. Leave them with the staff or the official. If you're not meeting in person, you can send it to them ahead of time so they have time to review it before your meeting. You know, and then my last point on this is that after you do meet with your elected official, you're going to want to follow up and say thank you. Send an email thanking them for the time meeting with you. You can attach additional resources at that point, any additional facts that maybe you didn't get a chance to cover, and tell them to contact you if you need additional information. Also be sure to periodically check in and let them know how invested you still are. We recently met with a legislator on the piece of legislation we're currently working on at the Arthritis Foundation, and one of the things that the elected officials said to us was to keep checking back with the people who are sponsoring the bill and letting them know how important it is to them. So we know that we're still invested in it and we haven't just forgotten. So I want to talk about social media. It's a great tool for advocacy. You can use it to grow your organization or to get people to participate in a specific campaign. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with all the different platforms, but just a quick, you know, covering of each of them. Every platform tends to have a little bit of a different clientele to it. Facebook tends to be a bit of a older generation, whereas Instagram tends to be more Gen X millennial. TikTok's a little more Gen Z, and every single one of them has a different platform for how to post, what type of content it accepts. And one of the very important things to keep in mind while we discuss this is that obviously with the climate of the TikTok movement right now, you know, you may build a platform there and get a following, and it may disappear tomorrow dependent upon legislation. So it is extremely important to be using multiple platforms, because I mean, we just never know at this point if it could just disappear tomorrow. It also allows you to contact multiple people across different age groups that way. We'll get into that a little bit more. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about quickly is, if you're not familiar with it, is Linktree. It is a great site that allows you to, specifically on Instagram and TikTok, allows you to have a link where all of your sources, sites, videos, everything is in one quick link. So your followers can touch the link in your bio and have access to your webpage, your other social media platforms. If you've got any PDFs that you want people to have access to, or the ability to upload stories from your volunteers or any other people that you may be working with, it's a great place to keep all your sources in one spot so people can find out more about the work that you guys are doing. And if you have a campaign going, you can have all of your stuff in one specific spot to keep everybody up to date. One of the best things you can do while you're growing your presence on your social media pages is make sure to follow your elected officials or other influential people who are in that movement that you're working towards. This allows you to see what they're interested in and follow if they're speaking about something that your cause can relate to. When you see these posts, you can interact with the posts and try to advocate for your cause through the comments or even reposting and interacting with them. Growing your community will be a big benefit to your cause. Following organizations with similar interests, you can also reach out to them through private messages and ask them to promote a campaign by reposting your work. Make sure everyone within your organization, your friends, your family, likes your posts, and also promote your social media at events, meetings. Anybody at Pathways will tell you that I am constantly promoting, and every single meeting we have, I will tell people our hashtags and make sure that they are following them. So we're able to get more people who are looking over our stuff and sharing. It seems silly, but you want to make sure everybody in your organization at the minimum is following you. And during those moments where you're having these conversations, you may never know who you're going to reach. You may interest in telling that you've got these pages. And so, like I said before, with the using of multiple platforms, just to come back to that for a quick second, one of the things at Pathways that we are very big on is intergenerational. Everything, we try to make sure that we're hitting every generation in everything we do. So using multiple platforms allows us to do that more easily. If we were just, let's say, posting on TikTok, we're only going to be hitting a specific type of demographic. So by using multiple platforms, we're increasing the chance that we're reaching more people and getting a more diverse grouping of people to join our cause and see what we're all about. So how should you create your posts? Most people create the actual image through a site like Canva. Canva allows you to either use their website or through an app on your phone if you're like me and tend to do things last minute at your desk during lunch breaks. You even, if you're a nonprofit, have the ability to use your tax ID and get a free membership, creating teams, having, I believe it's up to 5 people who can access your social media. It also makes it great if you're planning on having a team doing your campaigns. That way everybody can kind of make sure that the branding's consistent, and we can use each other's ideas to kind of work together to create something. And one of the other things is you can also find a lot of great ideas off the sites as well. If you aren't feeling especially inspired, there's always tons of different things that allow you to just kind of plug in your information, and like the background are all recreated. Or if you want to make a post, let's say for St. Patrick's Day, and you aren't feeling especially up to the challenge, a lot of times you can just search it and there will be something where you can just switch out your organization's information. So for the actual post itself, you want to keep the content and your image short, concise, powerful. In the fast-paced world, people scroll through Instagram very quickly. I am notorious for scrolling through, while I'm sitting on a bus or whatever, and just like fast scrolling, as and you want to make sure that whatever you're looking at is going to catch that person's eye. That's going to get the point across quickly, concisely. Too much text to get to your point will lose interest of your followers. Make sure that you're branding your work so when people scroll through, they know right away that it's your work. So they're not going to just go past it real quick and not even take a second glance at it. You can do this a couple different ways. As you'll see in the post that's here, you'll see that the brand is listed at the bottom. For pathways, I tend to use colors that signify that work with our logo. If we're doing something like for a while, we're doing something we called Team Member Tuesday. We branded it the same way every week, and we used the exact same backdrop and just plugged in a picture. Makes it easy, quick, and that way when people are scrolling through again, they're going to know it's you and it's going to get your point across. If there's more information than one image is really going to show, you can always create a reel, which is going to be a brief video, typically 1 minute long. Make sure that you have a non-camera shy person who is a little bit more well-spoken, to explain your mission, your agenda, why it's so important, and how the viewers can go about getting involved or talking about why they themselves have gotten involved. Make sure that you're using hashtags in your posts. This allows anyone that is searching a particular hashtag to have the chance to come across your page. Also create a hashtag for your campaign organization that makes it easy to track your footprint. Make sure that you consistently use the same ones. I know I'm sometimes bad about that and will forget a hashtag that I've used, and it's hard for people to follow that. Also make sure that you're using things that aren't random, something that's, that possibly could be easily found if you're searching through something. If you're using something that's so specific to your group that no one else could ever possibly imagine what it's going to be, it may make it difficult for other people to come across it and find it. And be sure to tag your elected officials and other decision makers. By tagging your officials, it gives them the chance to like your post or repost it, and your information that will give you increasing your chance for your information to be seen by other groups. It also gives you the chance to thank any elected officials who maybe have already signed on to your legislation. You can sit there and say, hey, thank you, Senator so-and-so for being one of the first people to sign on as a sponsor to this. You're doing such great work and you're helping us so much. That again, it comes back to helping. It boosts the ego a little bit, and we're not below that to kind of I mean, who does not like that? So it really does allow them the opportunity to kind of sit there and say, oh, look, these people think I'm so great because I'm helping them with this piece of legislation. So it's definitely always something that is extremely helpful to do. And if you're like me and you have a very packed schedule and only so much time a week to create posts, you can actually pre-schedule, which is something that a lot of people do not realize that you can do. So the Meta Business Suite through Facebook, through Instagram, allows you to schedule posts weeks in advance. And something I actually learned yesterday is that you can pre-schedule your stories too, which is something I did not know could be done, and something no one else in my organization knew could even be done. So again, it just makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to, wait around until the perfect moment to post something and then get busy and forget about it. You can do it weeks in advance and make sure that you're consistently scheduling things out. It's going to make your life easier, and it's going to make your team's life easier to have that stuff ready to go. Other thing you can do is use the boost function, which allows you to pay a small amount and amplify your voice to multiple other people. There's ways to break it down specifically to audiences you want to target. It can go so specific down that you could theoretically break it down to a specific street. If you're sitting trying to advocate for a stop sign on your road in a small town, you could break it down so concisely that only the people who are in a 1 mile radius of that location could hear about this campaign. So you're targeting the right people. And the wider you search, the less likely you are to reach an audience that may be interested in your cause. We at Pathways always believe strongly in promoting each other's organizations, doing similar work. I apologize. This is a constant life issue. So if we're all working for the same cause, why not lift each other up? Oh, and the last thing that I'm actually going to talk about, let me go back for a second, in regards to posting is live streaming and social media takeovers. Live streaming events and conferences allow people who may not be able to jump into a Zoom to watch the event. And a takeover is going to be when somebody physically takes over the social media account and posts throughout the day. You can use this if, let's say, you have an advocate who's going to DC and meeting with congressional candidates or elected officials, and that gives your audience a firsthand view of what the process is actually like. Again, it's another opportunity for your elected official to reach out directly to your campaign, because if you're meeting with them, they may want to take a picture with your organization and post it and be a part of your day, or shoot a small video with you and talk about your meeting. And not only is this going to show how important your work, the work you're doing is, but it's also going to continually engage your followers. You don't want to lose their interest. So when you have events like this, people are going to continue to look forward to what's going on. So I just wanted to talk quickly about how to get people to move from slacktivist to activist. Slacktivism is the practice of supporting a political or social cause by means involving very little effort or commitment. One of the ways that we can get people to move from just clicking to actually participating is providing easy, tangible next steps to increase your engagement campaign, whether that be signing petitions, promoting campaigns, or donations, all of which can be done through social media. Make sure your posts offer additional resources. Again, this comes back to your link tree. You can always have those additional links. If you've got petitions that you want people to sign, you can keep that in your bios and make sure that you have a link that your followers can click on at any time, day or night, and aren't going to have to go looking through your posts to find. And make sure your posts offer additional resources and links for people to learn more, to pique their interests in your cause and allow them to become more educated activists. So sometimes it is beneficial for organizations to join together to accomplish their goals. Multiple organizations working together have a large voice. I see this regularly with my work with the Arthritis Foundation. We constantly work with organizations like the American Cancer Society, other organizations like that who are all working towards the same common goal. Very recently, a lot of us got together to request additional CDC funding. There's a big push right now for pharmacy benefit managers for them to provide more transparency. And there's many organizations who come together to push for these types of legislation changes. At Pathways, we are doing that currently. Actually, we're working with the Peace Alliance to advocate for a Department of Peace in the United States, which is something that will be addressed later in our presentation. And by working together, we can use each other's resources, knowledge on the topic to make an impact when we sit down with elected officials. So peaceful protests have long been a way to bring about change, and we cannot talk about advocacy without talking about them. From the lunch counter sit-ins to the civil rights movements, to Greta Thunberg's Fridays for Climate Change, to the George Floyd protests seen around the world, we've seen how powerful a tool this can be. If we look at the George Floyd protests, we see that the attention it got in not only the United States and the world, the anger, fear, frustration we saw during the protests resonated with so many of us and sparked even more protests around the world. In my small town that's semi-conservative, only 2,000 people, there was even a small march that came through town and a moment-wide moment of silence. It was impactful and brought conversation into the households and to children that maybe otherwise would have never have learned about this. And a great example of peaceful protests making an impactful change in legislation are the protests that brought about the disability rights movement. There are two significant protests that I just want to very briefly talk about. The first took place in 1977, was known as the 504 sit-in. The protest was to demand the signing of the regulations to the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which was going to give rights to individuals with disabilities, which is a predecessor to the ADA. Groups from all over the US staged sit-ins in the US Department of Health, Education, and Welfare offices. The most well-known, best organized protest took place in San Francisco and was lasted close to 25 days and had over 100 activists, many of whom had disabilities that required round-the-clock care. Some of the protesters even went on hunger strikes for most of the time. Protests gained attention of other large groups like the Black Panthers, unions, LGBTQ rights groups, who helped the protesters by feeding them, providing mattresses and transportation when they inevitably made their way to DC. Another notable protest was known as the Capitol Crawl, which showed the barriers that are faced by people with disabilities on a daily basis. On March 13th, 1990, a group of disability advocates marched from the White House to the Capitol. Once they got there to their end destination, almost 60 advocates cast aside their wheelchairs and mobility instruments and began to physically crawl the steps of the Capitol. They did this to show the issues with inaccessibility to many buildings throughout the United States at the time. And the reason the Section 504 was finally signed partially had to do with the fact that that sit-in began receiving national news coverage. So let's imagine if these protests had taken place now and they had the resources that are currently available today. With the rise in social media, organizing mass protests have become easier to pre-plan on larger scales. Number of participants would have been far larger and probably made an impact much quicker than what actually ended up, how long it actually took. A video of a protest where wheelchair users were crawling Capitol steps to protest accessibility, one of which was one of the advocates who did this was only 9 years old at the time, would have been a viral moment that would have been shared millions of times across every platform humanly possible if they had had the ability to have access to these platforms. Another side of the increase in social media as it pertains to protests is that it has made it easy to organize large counter protests. We've seen this done recently and effectively with the drag performance counter protests. As quickly as protests to children's book readings by drag performers have been set up, so have the counter protests. Many of these counter protests are organized so fast, so effectively through social media that they end up surpassing the size of the initial protests. If you choose to use protests as a tool to further your cause, be sure to take pictures, videos during these types of events. You want your followers to see the hard work your organization is doing and the real life impact your protests are having. Make sure that you're live streaming. I mean, that also, let's be honest, holds accountability to the police forces and to the organizations that are held to keeping protests peaceful, because they're going to be caught on camera. So there's all these great things that come about with using social media when you're hosting events like protests. So another way that it's a little more low tech, but another great way to spread the word about issues you're advocating for is phone banking and canvassing. You know, social media is fantastic, and yes, technology, the way it's advancing has been phenomenal, but one-on-one is always going to be so helpful and garner so much more people who like that individualized attention. These techniques are going to give you the opportunity to speak one-on-one with potential advocates and go into a large amount of detail about what you're trying to accomplish. Keep in mind, these techniques do require some tough skin. You'll get hung up on, door slammed in your face. I one time had the misfortune of calling a woman who told me her husband had recently passed and she wasn't interested in speaking, only to find out about 10 minutes later, I dialed the number for a man that I had run the same woman looking for her deceased husband. So you may get screamed at, you may get cursed out a little bit, but you know, it's just part of becoming an advocate. You have to have a little bit of thick skin to work in the system. You're going to have to shake it off and keep it moving. The best thing you can do is prepare your volunteers the best you can. Providing volunteers with a script is crucial to making sure you are getting your message across and help people stay on track with conversations and make them as comfortable as possible with the call or door knocking. Make sure you're mindful of the days and times you are having them knock on your doors. You want to make sure that you're reaching the most amount of people. You don't want to be knocking on doors on a holiday or, you know, while people are heading out to dinner or at work. You want to make sure you maximize the amount of people you'll reach, and you don't want to knock, like I said, when no one's home. Make sure the canvases go in pairs. Keeping your volunteer safety is always the most important thing, especially in this day and age. So there's many ways to incorporate your passion with work. Getting people involved by joining events to bring awareness to your cause and play into people's passion for helping others, whether it be raffles, bingos, charity events. You can gain a lot of interest in your cause during these events. If you're holding an event to bring awareness to a cause, you can set up an advocacy table at those events to help educate people on your cause and what they can do to help. It also helps to have speakers who talk about their own personal stories. For example, with my work with the Arthritis Foundation, we host a charity run twice a year. And we use those events to promote our advocacy efforts. We bring educational material to hand out for anybody who stops past the table. We have paperwork talking about the laws and legislation that we're currently working on and what we've already done and what our game plan is to continue to move forward. We also ask if they're interested in learning more about these items. And we always ask if they maybe want to share their stories with us and if they would mind if we share the stories that they tell us with our legislators. Be sure that any stories that you gain from these types of events, you have permission to share. It's always so important to make sure that you're not sharing somebody's story. You know, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, the reason that I got involved in advocacy work was because my cousin was diagnosed very young with a autoimmune disease. And when I started doing advocacy work, the first thing I did was call him. And, you know, he was a young child at the time and he's in remission, thankfully now. But as a grown adult, I wanted to give him that opportunity to say, you know what, I'd prefer you not share my story because it's not his story. It's not my story to tell without his permission. And even though it affected my life and I was very much a part of it, you don't want to be telling anybody else's story without their okay and knowledge. You know, and part of the reason that we use these stories is that hearing a child speak about their journey with a serious condition humanizes the cause and incites people to want to take action. I mean, I personally have heard many stories over the last few years, and our most recent walk, I heard a story from one of our children advocates who was diagnosed very young, and it brought me to tears. And I've heard many horrible stories, and it just, even in me, ignited a flame to keep it moving and keep working for somebody like that who doesn't have the voice to speak for themselves. And when it comes to these types of events, a lot of private companies actually have budgets set aside to host not only, you know, charity events, but to also host educational seminars. So you have the opportunity to go in and talk to organizations about this, especially things pertaining to racial justice, climate change. A lot of organizations are looking for speakers to come in and talk to their employees about these types of items. You know, some actually, I know I have friends who work for companies that have seminars that they regularly do where they have disability rights advocates or LGBTQ plus advocates come in and speak about the cause and why it's so important to advocate for them. So to bring this full circle, as I said at the beginning, the last thing I want to talk about quickly is self-advocacy. Again, this doesn't really pertain to racial justice or social justice, but it's just something that I find is so important. And especially as a woman, we're just not taught to speak up for ourselves. You know, anybody who's heard me speak in the past has probably heard me talk about this, and I still regularly have problems advocating for myself. You know, you want to understand your strengths, needs, identify your personal goals, know your legal rights, responsibilities, and communicate these to others. So one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this is every couple of weeks, I feel like I see a news story about a woman who was diagnosed with late stage cancer or something because a doctor didn't take her seriously, or they just continually just said, no, there's nothing wrong with you, you're just fat. And it's something that it's so difficult to see women dismissed on this kind of level, to the point where we are literally dying because no one takes us seriously. Personally, the reason I chose to do this presentation on advocacy and focus on self-advocacy is because this is something that's taken me years to deal with. I still struggle with it regularly. I was always the type not to really rock the boat or question people too much. Even to this day, my parents have always instilled in me, you kind of just go with the flow and sit quietly and just don't really rock too much. My personal self-advocacy journey began with having doctors refuse to take my chronic pain seriously. It took close to 8 years and over a half dozen doctors before I was able to finally speak up enough for myself to be taken seriously. In the amount of time it took for me to get a proper diagnosis, get on proper medications, the damage that was already done to my body was irreversible. So it's something that I find is just so important to discuss. This also happens so frequently in the workplace. Recently on my own end, I found out that I was awarded a promotion, and after I, threatened to leave because the promotion wasn't coming along quick enough, I was given a increase to the promotion, only to find out that a man who had been working at my organization for 5 years less than I had was given the exact same promotion and only given a few $1,000s less because I had threatened to leave. So it's something that constantly bears repeating. Speak up for yourself. Make sure that you're constantly fighting for what you deserve. It's, like I said, it's difficult. It's something that personally has taken years of insane amount of therapy and a lot of motivation from my friends and family to really feel comfortable in my own skin doing. And it's something that I feel that we should all really be working towards, especially women. We need to continue to advocate for ourselves and show people that we are just as good and can do the same work as any man can, and that we're people too. So I just want to open the floor to some conversation, some questions. Couple questions I have here. What are things that affect you and others in your life that are worth advocating for? How do you get involved? What are the most effective ways to advocate for your cause? This is an opportunity. If you have anything that has worked for you in the past that you want to share with us and open up to tell us what you've done that maybe has worked, that you feel may work for others as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. And even before we get our audience engaged, I just want to thank you so much. You are just such an incredible pro. You know your stuff. And so this is an opportunity for our audience to kind of respond to the questions that you put on the table, and as well as to ask you questions if they have any. And so I've encouraged them to track their questions. So if you are a participant here and you'd like to ask a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand, which is in the reactions. And sometimes the reactions, if you look at the bottom of your screen, of your Zoom screen, you'll see there's a place that says reactions. Raising your hand is there, or sometimes it's under more to the right of your screen. So let's see. Lori, let the decision maker you are trying to persuade think that your proposed solution is their idea. We've talked about this.
It's great. That's 100% you want them to sit there and say, oh yeah, this was totally me, because again, we come back to, it looks good to them. It makes them look better to their constituents. And honestly, depending upon what the issue is, it's not the worst thing in the world.
No, and I would just piggyback on what you said, Katie, and you mentioned this earlier, but doing your homework on that individual representative and getting a sense of what their interests are, what their values are, makes it a little more possible for you to come up with a way that really is based in what they already care about, so they can own that decision for themselves and think that it's their idea because it fits who they are. Other questions, thoughts, comments? David raised his hand. So David, go ahead.
Hello, thank you. Wonderful, Katie. Absolutely outstanding. Learning about this and learning more about you. I appreciate you all the more. Thank you so much. If you would just, and I don't know if you addressed this right in the beginning, but if you just make a comment of a couple things. One is being an advocate versus a lobbyist. And then the other is your personal passion, as you've expressed, versus a job.
So I didn't get into lobbying versus advocacy, but advocating doesn't have to be legislation. Let's say I focus on that a little bit just because that happens to be my background. But advocating can be really for anything. It doesn't have to just be that you're saying we want this piece of legislation passed. It can be that you want equal rights in a way, or you are looking to have, just that you're looking to have everybody have the same opportunities. And as we talked about self-advocacy, where you're standing up for yourself and just speaking to what is important and why you should be taken just as seriously as anybody else. Whereas lobbying tends to be a lot more of the going towards legislation for I'd say a lot of times it ends to be a personal gain. But so for me specifically, I feel that between advocacy and how it becomes a passion and instead of work, if it, to me, I guess I would say, if it feels like a chore, it's probably work. But I've always said, my grandmother said something to me recently that my grandfather used to say to her all the time, where he would say, you don't work in your career. He said, you use that career to finance your passion. And that's something that I kind of have been taking to heart recently, that, this may not be my career, but it is my area of absolute passion. It's something that I wake up in the morning thinking about, and I go to bed thinking about. It's not something that has to be, it shouldn't be stressful. It should be something that sets your soul on fire.
Yes.
And along that line, that with Pathways to Peace, we're advancing ideas, advancing possibility, advancing kind of like a leading edge in so many ways. So what you're talking about is really actualizing that into the world and finding that you're having the avenues to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, David, for those of you who don't know, David Wick is the president of Pathways to Peace and has been with Pathways to Peace in the beginning of its 40-year history and all along. And so when Katie came to Pathways to Peace, and when anyone comes to Pathways to Peace to get involved with us, the first question I ask is, what would make your heart sing? Because of course, we want it to be mutually beneficial if it's going to be effective. So Katie, you make our hearts sing, our collective hearts sing all the time.
Yep.
I want to dip back and just add something to the question about what's the difference between advocacy and lobbying. And I'm going to take it from the perspective of being a charitable organization, a nonprofit or an NGO. So there are legal organizations to do lobbying that are still charitable organizations. They are not 501c3 organizations. But 501c3 organizations, the myth out there is that we can't do any lobbying. And the truth is that a little bit of lobbying is allowed. You'll have to check your nonprofit statutes in your state. But really what we're doing in advocacy is educating legislators. We're just providing the opportunity to them by educating them to support particular bills. It's not partisan because we want support from all parties. And so that falls under educating legislators, even though it could perhaps look like lobbying. And educating legislators is perfectly allowable for 501c3 nonprofits in the US. So thank you. Other questions, thoughts, comments? So Katie, I have a question while we're waiting for others to think. So in all of your work, all of your advocacy work, which is a lot, what would you say are the biggest challenges or barriers in the work?
I would say first and foremost is definitely the politics of everything. First off, when we watched the little Schoolhouse Rock video, that's something that is, to me, extremely frustrating because not everything that gets brought needs to be discussed. So recently, like I said, we brought a piece of legislation to the New Jersey State Legislature, and on one side it pushed through immediately, and on the other side it's just been sitting because they've basically told us at the beginning that it may not be important enough of a piece of legislation to kind of stick their necks out for. So it's one of those things where it's just the politics behind it can be extremely frustrating because you could have a piece of legislation that's extremely bipartisan, has no financial motivation behind it, doesn't require much of anything, and it's just sits because they only can reach so many pieces of legislation so quickly. The other thing is, it's just that the process is so long and arduous to get something moving. Finding people to sponsor something, the piece of legislation that we are going to discuss later with the Department of Peace Building, that's been a piece of legislation that I'm sure Anne would love to chime in at any point, has been reintroduced every single congressional period for however many years. So, it can be a very long, time-consuming, frustrating thing, and then it may just get pushed through because out of nowhere, for some issue or another, or all of a sudden some special interest group has like screamed for it, and now all of a sudden, to make somebody look good, they're going to push it through. So it can just be very upsetting, and again, it's one of those things you kind of just have to not take personally, and just keep pushing forward with it and not get frustrated when you have to call and continually check on something getting moved through. It's difficult. I mean, look at the amount of times that we've discussed gun legislation in the United States and how many times we've discussed it and how many times it's come up, and it still hasn't budged, no matter how many people in the country think that it's an important thing. So it's one of those things that if you're not prepared for it to be long and you go into it thinking, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be done immediately, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the next part of my question is really, because you train advocates and you're very engaged in I'll say inspiring advocates to be advocates. What do you think are the greatest barriers because I think for many people, they feel strongly about some of these bills. they'd like to be able to influence them, but for some reason, they're just not getting engaged. What do you think are the greatest challenges or barriers for
One of which I think
those
is
individuals?
it's extremely intimidating. It's something that we discuss regularly with my other organization. If you've never scheduled a meeting with a legislator, sometimes it's, you think it's going to be way more difficult than it is. And if you're a person who maybe has anxiety, I know that for me, the first couple of times, even still, I'm first on the topics and I still get a little bit of anxiety before I go into anything. The other thing is finding the organization that you want to work with. It's so difficult to get linked up sometimes, even though there may be something that you're extremely passionate about. You may not even realize that there's a group out there that's already working on something that you think's important. And on top of that, I mean, the bandwidth to do additional things on top of everything else. I mean, we're at year 3 since the beginning of the pandemic, and people are still dealing with burnout, mental health issues from that. So finding time and space to mentally dive into an endeavor like that, that's going to take up time in your life. And again, it takes up mental space. And I mean, it's hard to bring yourself sometimes to get involved in those kind of things when you're already just mentally spent.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. So I'm going to ask the audience one more time if a question, thought, or comment has come up for you before we move into talking a bit about HR 1111, the Department of Peace Building bill. And I may ask Anne for you to talk a little bit about that. And then we are going to close with a Pathways to Peace manifestation meditation that was created to support the passage of HR 1111, the Department of Peace Building bill. But let me first just ask if there are any other questions, thoughts, comments from our audience. I can feel the wheels turning, but nothing's coming up. So I think we'll go ahead and move into this next stage. Before we do that, Katie, oh my goodness, you're just the best. I know I say that all the time, but I can't say it enough. And I think if folks are willing to kind of let us see you, we'll give Katie a round of applause. And she may not be able to hear it, but she'll be able to see it. So Katie, thank you, thank you, thank you. Woohoo! Thank you, thank you. So now let's move into this next piece. And unfortunately, our event tonight was in conflict with the Peace Alliance meeting. And so we invited them to join us for the manifestation meditation that Tammy and I have put forward. But before we move into that, because we'd like to capture everyone's intention around the passage of that bill, everyone in this room, and we know that the Peace Alliance is going to be using this meditation as well. But Anne, in a nutshell, can you talk to us about the bill? Whatever's on your heart will be perfect. And you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Well, I've been working for almost 20 years now on this bill to create a federal cabinet level Department of Peace Building. And when Katie was talking, I think one of the reasons why people didn't have any questions was, Katie, you were so thorough in the things that you said. There's no need for questions. But one of the things that you talked about was how it's a long haul often to get from the time that a bill first becomes drafted as Mr. Bill did in your video, to the point where it's people where there's traction to it. And I can't believe that I've been doing this work for almost 20 years, because the Department of Peace Building Bill was first introduced in 2001, in July of 2001, by Dennis Kucinich, 2 months before 9/11. And I think at the time that it was first introduced, it was considered like wacky, like what, peace, what is that? But in the last 20 years since it was first introduced, I personally can't think of a more important bill that needs to be enacted, because of all of the violence that we experience on all the different levels in our country, and throughout the world, with what's going on, with Ukraine, and the same dynamics that create war are the ones that create violence, interpersonal violence. And so the Department of Peace bill is really, it's a way of institutionalizing or operationalizing what peace is all about in many different, on all the different levels that we experience violence. If we had a way, a mechanism where peace would be the fundamental priority of our country, by having this legislation, we would be able to consciously focus on actions that will create peace. I don't know if I'm making any sense right now, but it's just really important to, when you think about the Constitution of the United States, the 6 different reasons why, in order to form a more perfect union, and all of the different, I can never remember the whole thing. That's really the fundamental purpose of our government, is to create peace, and it's failing in that. So to have a department that would be equal in resources to the Department of War, where we study ways that create peace, because in the last 20 years since we've been working on this legislation, peace has become, it's a science. Nonviolence is a science, and there's ways that we know now that work to reduce violence, but they have to be activated, and we have to have the political will to do it. So I could go on forever, but that's essentially
perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're so grateful for your efforts. And our beloved co-founder, Avon Madison, was very engaged in the initial Department of Peace Building bill as well. So Pathways to Peace has had its passion, its heart in that bill since the beginning. And so coming out of our strategic plan last year, our youth, as you've already heard, were very engaged with next generation peace builders, and they were very interested in advocacy. And so we decided to step up our efforts around advocacy, and the Department of Peace Building just seemed like a natural, because we're all about peace. It's a nonpartisan issue. It's a greatly undersourced issue when we talk about the SDGs at the United Nations. Number 16, which is about peace, is the most under-resourced of all of the SDGs. And so we need to at least resource our need for peace at the same level, as you said, Anne, as we do with what we put into war. And we know that, I mean, the Business Plan for Peace by Cilla Elworthy talked about what kind of a bang we could get for our buck around investing in peace versus investing in war. We could bring peace to our nation and to the world at a much lower cost than what we spend on war. So we're in it with you. And at this point, I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to ask Tammy to kind of unmute again. because we're going to be bringing her up in a moment as we begin to kind of end our time with you. I'm going to take care of a little of the technology here. And thank you all of you for your patience with our technology. Okay. There we go. And so it's been a little while ago that Tammy came to me. We had actually had lunch together, and she came to me with her list of what she thought we should do together at Pathways to Peace. And I love these kinds of conversations because, as I've said, I'm typically the yes person. I'm typically the one saying, yes, let's do it. Let's do it. And Tammy is such a beautiful visionary. And we both have been very invested in the passage of the Department of Peace Building bill. And so Tammy brought in this certification that she had in this method called meditation manifestation. And she said, I think we should do this meditation manifestation to support passage of the bill. She had the process, she created the script, we took it to the Peace Alliance. They had some massaging of it, but loved the concept and wanted to have it be a part of the passage of the bill. And so we're going to invite all of you this evening before our final closing to get engaged in the passage of this bill by participating with us in this meditation manifestation. It only takes, well, less than 5 minutes. And we ask you to just kind of sit back in your chairs, once again, with an open heart and open mind to participate in this. I'm going to turn it over to Tammy to add whatever she'd like to, and then she'll be playing the harp as I read the manifestation segments. Tammy?
Yeah, so thank you. I mean, it's just a joy to work with this. And I attended one meeting about 13 months ago with the Peace Alliance. And as I was sitting in the meeting, I thought, oh, I think this manifestation meditation would be really interesting to try, and we'll see where it goes. So that's kind of how the idea bubbled up. And then Tez said, as she just said, yes. So basically, this is a technique that I use when I'm working with people that are specifically really wanting to manifest very important things in their life that are very meaningful to them. And it really is a merging of what Katie was just talking about with advocacy and manifesting all of these different things that we want. So you write a core statement, and that core statement gets repeated for 3 minutes. And then there's 4 supporting statements, and each of those statements gets repeated 17 seconds each. And so the whole thing takes a little less than 5 minutes. It's very quick, it's very powerful, and in this situation, we really want to help manifest the Department of Peace Building with the US government. And it's best if you can repeat it every day. So literally take 5 minutes in your meditation, repeat what Tez is about to read and what we're about to experience. And as we do that collectively, that's the juice That's the pushing it out into the collective. And why the harp? Two reasons. First of all, the harp helps move us to inner peace. And when we're in that peaceful place, that's what we radiate out. And that's what this whole bill is about, is creating peace. And then the harp also, when it's played with the intention of focus and high vibration, which is what I will be doing as we're working with this meditation, that's what will help radiate it out. So with that, I would invite you to connect with your breath, and Tez will take it from there.
The United States strives for its highest potential by weaving the actualization of peace for all into the fabric of our government and culture. We have reached a tipping point with a growing number of people interested and involved in the grassroots peace movement. This abundance of peace builders signals to legislators to sign H.R. 1111, which establishes the first cabinet-level Department of Peace Building. An overwhelming number of Congress members vote yes, making history to create the Department of Peace Building. The president, legislators, and citizens are excited to manifest this cultural shift and model it to the world. Peace prevails on earth, and so it is. The United States strives for its highest potential by weaving the actualization of peace for all into the fabric of our government and culture. We have reached a tipping point with a growing number of people interested and involved in the grassroots peace movement. This abundance of peace builders signals to legislators to sign H.R. 1111, which establishes the first cabinet-level Department of Peace Building. An overwhelming number of Congress members vote yes, making history to create the Department of Peace Building. The president, legislators, and citizens are excited to manifest this cultural shift and model it to the world. Peace prevails on earth, and so it is. The United States strives for its highest potential by weaving the actualization of peace for all into the fabric of our government and culture. We have reached a tipping point with a growing number of people interested and involved in the grassroots peace movement. This abundance of peace builders signals to legislators to sign H.R. 1111, which establishes the first cabinet-level Department of Peace Building. An overwhelming number of Congress members vote yes, making history to create the Department of Peace Building. The president, legislators, and citizens are excited to manifest this cultural shift and model it to the world. Peace prevails on earth, and so it is. I am deeply grateful for the creation of a U.S. Department of Peace Building. I am deeply grateful for the creation of a U.S. Department of Peace Building. I am deeply grateful for the creation of a U.S. Department of Peace Building. My heart is elated that a U.S. Department of Peace Building is created and making a significant contribution to the United States and the world. My heart is elated that a U.S. Department of Peace Building is created and making a significant contribution to the United States and the world. The U.S. Department of Peace Building encourages all citizens to seek, embrace, and celebrate the blessings of peace. The U.S. Department of Peace Building encourages all citizens to seek, embrace, and celebrate the blessings of peace. I love watching the beautiful work that is coming from a U.S. Department of Peace Building. I love watching the beautiful work that is coming from a U.S. Department of Peace Building. I love watching the beautiful work that is coming from a U.S. Department of Peace Building. And so it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you for engaging with us in the manifestation of HR 1111. If you'd like more information on the bill, you can go to the Peace Alliance website and you'll find a copy of the bill there, as well as opportunities to engage in advocacy. There will be a video available that replicates what Tammy and I did here. And as Tammy said, we're hoping that you can access that video. You can get that at TEZ, T-E-Z, at Pathways to Peace. We are currently testing it with some good results, but it will be made public. And we hope that you will practice it every day, less than 5 minutes after over 20 years, to push this bill, this Department of Peace Building bill, into passage. We've tried everything else. We're actively working on our advocacy. Now it's time to bring our meditation manifestation, put that to work in the final passage. So thank you, Tammy, for bringing forward so much of your talent, the heart, but also this beautiful, beautiful meditation manifestation. Thank you for your passion. And Anne says that was a most beautiful and powerful advocacy for HR 1111 I've experienced. Blessings to us, blessings for the passage of the bill. So in closing, I just want to thank all of you for being here. At Pathways to Peace, we always say, please know You are a pathway to peace, regardless of where you've been, regardless of who you are and what you're doing or where you're going. You are a pathway to peace. And together, we can make Peace Day every day. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And again, thank you, Katie, for your amazing wisdom. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent all around.